Well, there's now some information coming from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, their weather service, that the El Niño weather phenomenon, which drives higher temperatures and drier weather over southern Africa, may be over. Normally, the state of what's called the El Niño Southern Oscillation System can be determined by the surface temperature of the Pacific Ocean. Now it appears this weather system is in what the Australians call a neutral state. In other words, it's no longer in an El Niño state. Simon Gear is an expert on weather. He joins us now. Simon, good afternoon to you. What does this mean? If the El Niño phenomenon is over, what does it mean for us?
Good afternoon, Stephen. It's certainly not over. This is an oscillation, so it goes back and forth. Like a pendulum swinging, it goes out to the El Niño side, which means warming off the coast of Peru, and then when it swings back and it gets much cooler off the coast of Peru, that we call that the La Niña. But El Niño Southern Oscillation is essentially the fancy name for variations in wind patterns and in sea surface temperatures over the Pacific Ocean. But that has a knock-on effect right the way around the world. And it accounts for about 30% of the rainfall variability for South Africa. So when we're in an El Niño phase, we tend to have slightly drier conditions over certainly the summer rainfall region of South Africa. When we're in La Niña, it tends to be slightly wetter. And so we're now in that neutral phase where it's going to have the least effect on our weather.
So when we had the long 6-week sort of heat wave in Gauteng quite recently, for example, could we say that one of the reasons for that was El Niño?
No, not really. El Niño, La Niña works on a 3.5-year cycle. So it's a very, very sort of rough variation in our weather. And so it's more, there will be a slightly greater tendency for temperatures to be slightly higher or for it to be slightly drier or so on. But then all of our normal weather happens on top of that. So it's far more like imagine the difference between the tide and the waves in the ocean is a good way of thinking about it.
Okay. So, so it's been interesting that we were told, sort of 3 years of La Niña, which is one of the reasons we had so much rain for 3 years. Then we've had 1 year of El Niño. Does it go back and forth? Does it sort of equal itself out over time? Does it equalize? Or can you actually not really know what you're going to get the next year?
It should. It should be a fairly regular and predictable system. But the other hair in the ointment is that, or fly in the ointment rather, is that with climate change, a lot of what we thought we knew about the teleconnections with these sort of global systems is beginning to break down a little bit. And so we're not nearly as good at predicting the impact that things like El Niño, La Niña will have. And also just the regularity of ENSO as well is something that seems to be slightly wobbly at the moment.
I presume that, the correlation between surface temperatures in the Pacific and El Niño and La Niña are, that there seems to be quite a strong correlation. What I'm trying to get to is, can we believe the Australians when they say that it's now in a neutral phase?
I would believe the Australians. It would be an odd thing to lie about. But yeah, it's a very easily measured thing. And in fact, the changes in the sea surface temperatures are actually more an indicator of the changes in the winds that are lying on top of this. So, so as wind blows across an ocean, it moves that surface water, and you get cold upwellings. And if that wind weakens, so then the surface water just sits there, and so you'll get a warmer sea surface temperature. So it's actually more a wind variation than anything else, but the sea surface temperature is the footprint of that change.
I've had some climatologists tell me that one of the differences is that in El Niño years, the sea is giving back the heat that it's taken in, and that in La Niña years, the sea is taking heat in. Do you see it like that, or are there other ways to look at it as well?
It's an interesting take, but I think it's more to do with the weakening and strengthening of the winds that blow across the ocean. And so the reason that in a La Niña year that the water is cold off Peru is not because the water is just naturally cold, but because the wind is blowing across the surface, and so you're getting a very strong upwelling of cold, deep water to the surface. And similarly, when that wind weakens, so then that surface water just sits there, and so it's more easily warmed by the sun. So I think, I don't think I would agree with the idea that the sea is giving back energy or taking it in.
Simon Gear, thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate that.